Welcome back. Now we'll have the second part of the conference that will we'll have the guest speakers. So we'll start with Professor Jarosław Tęgowski from the University of Gdansk. So I'll give the floor to Professor Jarosław, who will give a short lecture on the underwater noise sources and impacts for the environment. Please.
Okay. Thank you very much for introduction. I will switch on my presentation. One moment. Do you see?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thank you very much for information. I was invited to give a lecture presentation about underwater noise sources and impact on the environment. I didn't know too much about audience of my presentation, and maybe I prepared too many information about basic acoustic phenomena. Well, let's start. Contents: basic acoustic phenomena, long-distance sound propagation, natural and anthropogenic sources of underwater sounds, noises emitted by ships, some results, very rough results from the BIAS project, noises emitted by recreational craft, and effects of anthropogenic noise on marine mammals. Transmission of energy in wave movement. For longitudinal waves, we know that, sorry, I should make some movement of particles oscillate forwards and backwards only in the local area of the distal bands. We can observe only transport of energy, not transport of mass. And what is the wavelength, wave period, frequency? I hope that you know very well. And in underwater acoustic, we can divide sound for 4 groups: infrasound, audible sound, ultrasound, and hypersound above 10 to power 10 hertz. We are interested mainly in 3 first ranges of natural sound. Speed of sound in the water depends on temperature, salinity, and pressure. We know, and we can write equation for the dependence of speed of sound from temperature, salinity, and pressure. It is 5 multiplied by temperature, plus 1 plus 3 multiplied by salinity, plus 0.015 multiplied by pressure, plus 1,400. It is a general equation, and we see that the temperature is a crucial parameter for the speed of sound in the water. In the deep ocean, but also in the Baltic Sea, we can observe the oceanic sound or sound channel, SOFAR. It is made from sound fixing and raging channel. Is a layer of water in which is the minimal value of speed of sound velocity, and in such layer, sound, especially of very low frequency, can be transported on the very long distance. And I would like to show the results of very known experiments in 1991 in the University of Heard Island, were deployed five sources of sound producing noise with frequency of 57 and 14 hertz, and this sound was registered in the very long distance, in the distance up to 18,000 kilometers. Pioneer Seamount, California, North California, Monterey. From Head Island to Bermuda Island, signal arrived after about 3 hours. It is the proof that underwater sound can be emitted for very, very long distance, 80,000 kilometers, as you see. Sources of sound in the ocean. We see very different sources of sound. The main producer of underwater sounds are breaking waves. But also we can observe other natural sources of sound stored, earthquakes, lightnings, wind, rains. The big source of sound in the ocean is man-made sound. Professor Björn, 26 years ago, in 1998, in his publication, established that since the Second World War, the average level of the ambient noise increased by 12-15 decibels. We should remember that it is logarithmic scale, it's not linear scale. It's a huge jump, huge jump in the noise produced by people, anthropogenic noise. Also, we should remember that world's human population grown in 1960 was about 3 million people. Now is above 8 billion people. People should transport different items using ships, and for that reason, also the number of ships and the transportation is bigger and bigger from year to year. The herring ranges. I found the picture of animal herring range comparison with anthropogenic noise sources. As you see, from jellyfish to turtles, different fishes, whales, dolphins, porpoises, sea lions, etc. The herring ranges are overlapping with anthropogenic noise sources. Large ships, small boats, air guns, operational wind farms, and other sources. The ranges of sounds are the same. And one moment, sorry, I have some technical small problems. And what is with the noise in the Baltic Sea? Baltic Sea is an enclosed sea with very high levels of ship traffic emitting underwater noise. Statistically, we know that at any given time, there are about 2,000 ships sailing in the water. That means that there are not ships staying in the harbor or port. There are ships in the open waters, 2,000 ships. 20 years ago, with Aleksander Klauson, we were involved in the BIAS project. It was a big project, the list of institutions which took a part in this project. We deployed officially 38 acoustical buoys, and we measured the level of sound pressure level in the whole Baltic Sea. It was the first such project in the world, I think, where people measured the level of noise in such a big area. I was involved in a similar project in Adriatic Sea a few years ago, but it was much smaller project as a bias project. And the first results, examples of results from other projects, we received a lot of data and very interesting data. Noise map, 125 Hz band from February to October of 2014. And from month to month, we see the changeability of sound pressure level in whole Baltic Sea, and from the left it is percentile 75. It means that 75% of loudest noise is visible in this picture. 50% of loudest noise and 10%, only 10% of loudest noise is visible on the right picture. And we can see the routes of ships in the Baltic Sea. The next result, 63, 125 and 2000 Hertz, three frequencies, and the annual median map for the full water column. Also, we see how loudest is the Baltic Sea and how many ships are going from harbor to harbor in the Baltic Sea, producing underwater noise. In the Baltic, we have many species of fishes, but not many of marine mammals. There are harbor porpoise and gray seal, two species, which you can find in Baltic Sea. We know that in Baltic Sea we have only about 500 individuals of porpoise population. In Danish Straits, for comparison, we have 30,000 individuals. And there are the map of distribution of common harbor porpoise subpopulation modeled as a probability of detecting clipping sequences in the August 2014. Harbor porpoise population is very, very, very low in the Baltic Sea, we should remember. And what are the sources of underwater noise pollution? We know that the main source of continuous noise are vessels, also military activities, recreational craft, industrial activities and construction, echo sounders and sonars, seismic survey. Underwater noise pollution. Potential effects sound can have on marine mammals, behavioral changes, masking, hearing loss, physical injuries, strandings, and also death. Behavioral changes, no response at all to changes in interruption of variety of behavior, diving, surfacing, vocalization, foraging, feeding, and mating. My Master of Science students, Monika Dindo, made experiment in the sea pen at fjord belt in Kerteminde, Denmark. She deployed hydrophone in the sea pen and registered the noise produced by vessels in the strait, and also registered the reaction of porpoises. And she found that the noise produced by vessels distance from this seapen to the main road of the vessels was about 1,000 meters. She found the reaction of porpoises. They escaped from the wall, from the net, to the corner of the tank, of this basin. Maybe it was the first such controlled experiment. Was from 2015. Reaction of porpoise noise coming from vessels. To vessels, we can observe the big reaction. Porpoises escape from the source of noise. The next effect, masking. Reaction of to masking noise, stopping of vocalizations, rising the intensity of vocalization above the noise, changing the frequency of vocalization. It was registered or observed that humbugs change the frequency of vocalizations, and also in some areas vocalizations of humbugs is louder than 20, 30 years ago.
Sorry, I will be just the timekeeper here. I'm sorry, Jarosław, just if you can wrap up.
Sorry, I know that my presentation is too long. Okay, hearing loss, stridings, the awful picture of the baked whales on the beach in Heraklion. Ship traffic in the Gulf of Gdansk. I would like to say something about sources of noise, anthropogenic origin in the Puck Bay and Gulf of Gdansk, but I see that we don't have the time for a long presentation. Give me 2 minutes. We have a lot of many yacht harbors, commercial harbors, and places where torpedo and mine detonation are. In the Gulf of Gdansk, also we have a lot of recreational craft, and for that reason, in the Gulf of Gdansk, we have very high level of the noise of anthropogenic origin. I compared the last 2 slides. I compared results of registration of sound pressure level in January and in July from 10 Hertz to 10 kilohertz, small mistake. And we found that in July level of noise is much higher than in January. The reason is that we have a lot of recreational craft in the Puck Bay. Also, for 2000 Hertz, we observed as such phenomena. And last conclusion. Underwater noise of anthropogenic origin greatly harms the living of marine animals, potentially leading to their deaths in extreme cases. The International Maritime Organization plans to quiet the seas and oceans through restrictive regulation limiting noise emitted underwater by ships. I am the member of the Polish delegation to the IMO, and every year I take a part in meetings, especially in January, and now is a time limit from 3 to 6 years should be introduced restrictive regulation for limitation of underwater noise produced by ships. I know because I take a part in some discussions. And the last sentence, pressure should be put on governments and local authorities, organizations to introduce regulations limiting underwater noise emitted by recreational craft, because IMO is only for ships, not for recreational craft. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, many thanks, Professor, for your in-depth presentation on the problem of the underwater noise. Do we have any questions on the topic?
Okay, no questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have no questions, and we move further to another speaker. So please, Aleksander Klauson, please take the floor. We'll hear about the underwater noise impact assessment in the Baltic Sea.
Now you can share, sorry.
So I'll try to do it now. Can we see it? My presentation, is it in share or not?
Not yet, no.
Don't see it
Not
yet.
full screen. Okay.
We don't see anything.
We don't see anything.
Okay. Share.
Now I think it will work. Yes, now it works.
Great. Now it's in full screen. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting. And in continuation to Jarosław's presentation, I will talk about underwater noise impact assessment in the Baltic Sea. And the scope of my presentation is so shortly about sources of continuous noise. Jarosław presented them quite in a good way. In the second, so we will try to answer the question, what should we do with underwater noise? And then I will talk about monitoring program and environmental impact assessment in the Baltic Sea. So first of all, short presentations. I'm working in Tallin University of Technology, and now we have underwater acoustics laboratory, which is working for some more than 10 years. And so for sources, I will concentrate on continuous noise sources, and the main sources are shipping noise. We also have dredging, and we have wind farms, but not yet so much farms actually in the Baltic Sea. So to explain effects of low frequency continuous noise to marine life, here is a graph showing time axis and sound pressure level axis. So normally we have natural sound, which is omnipresent in the sea. When ship is passing by the hydrophone, we have increase of SPL, what we call anthropogenic sound, and total plus natural. So total sound pressure level is natural plus anthropogenic sound, and we have excess of anthropogenic sound over the natural sound. And actually, it is believed that total sound, which including natural and anthropogenic, is mainly producing disturbance of the species, and excess level is mainly responsible for masking of communication of marine species, but also on disturbance. It can be also considered as disturbance factor. So what should we do with underwater noise? Here is a diagram. It's in consequence of directive of European Parliament. And this diagram is showing what should we do to mitigate underwater sound. So first of all, there is a notion of good environmental status. In the center of this diagram is monitoring. So we need to monitoring to understand what is happening in the sea. And once we've made our monitoring, we can make assessment of the anthropogenic sound. And this assessment will show us whether we are in good environmental status or not. If we are not, we should set environmental targets and program of measures to meet criterion of good environmental status. And of course, in the center, the monitoring program, which should verify every step of this diagram. Next, Marine Strategy Directive show us, so we will concentrate on two spots of this diagram. This is monitoring program and assessment. So for underwater sound monitoring, we need to measure sound and we need to model sound, because we cannot measure in every point of the sea. We need to model and we need to calibrate this model in order to understand what is happening. So these two are monitoring program. Next, when monitoring program gives us some results, we can analyze these results, and based on this analysis, we can we have threshold values, and with these threshold values, we can make GES assessment of the marine area of the Baltic Sea in general. So two joint efforts happened in the Baltic Sea. There's a lot of participants. One is BIAS project mentioned by Jarosław. It was led by Sweden and so other participants from the Baltic Sea. And it was a first attempt to establish monitoring program and to compose noise maps. In the second, so from 21 to 23, we had another project, Helcom Blues, which was led by us. This project was with much smaller budget, so we have used monitoring data already available in ICES continuous noise registry, and based on this, we have made GS assessment of the Baltic Sea also for the first time. So monitoring program of BIAS, it was, yes, 38 monitoring stations. And what was good in this program that it was coordinated effort. So everybody made measurements in the same way. All instruments were calibrated, and this is important that instruments are calibrated before and after the measurements. So this was a project made in the best available way at that period. This is typical measurement rig used in BIAS project. So we have hydrophone, acoustic release, and anchor. And with these instruments, we could measure up to half a year, for example, or a little bit more. I think we had maybe 3 months or 4 months periods of measurement. And compared to this, in the Blues project, every member country measured in their own way. And also we had much less monitoring station. Here on the left side picture, you can see these monitoring stations. And to choose period for modeling, we have chosen period with the best coverage of data, and it was the year 2018. But still we have only 10 monitoring stations, and not all of them could be used for the calibration. So calibration was so-so. So for marine reporting units, we have used Helcom sub-basins, because the purpose of this project also was to make assessment for holistic assessment of the Baltic Sea. Okay, so modeling is also making part of a monitoring program. And in monitoring, in modeling, we can get total sound pressure level or excess level. So actually, the both are possible, and for different frequency ranges and for different excess levels. Next, we should do impact assessment. For this, there is methodology of made by work group Teach Noise, and this document is available. And it is description of this methodology in short is in 9 steps. First, we need to define indicator species. Then we should define what is harmful for this particular species or level of offset of biologically adverse effects. Then we need to define time periods for assessment. It was 1 month. Then we should choose a year, so the period was 2018. Establish the reference condition and presence and current condition, so difference is in presence or absence of shipping noise. Next, we need to evaluate condition in 1 grid cell, which was about 500 to 500 meters. And next, we have habitats as for each habitat was sub-basin of the Baltic Sea. Indicator species in the Baltic Sea, so we have chosen fishes, Baltic herring and cod, and seals. We have 3 species of seals in different parts of the Baltic Sea, but all of them are comparable sensitivity, and of course, harbor porpoise. For frequency bands, we have chosen 125 for fish and 500 for marine mammals. And what kind of effects we should assess? In BLUE's project, we decided to assess both disturbance and masking on the principle that 1 out, all out. Lobe values for marine species can be found from the literature, and here some numbers. And surprisingly, the number is the same, so 500 hertz decidecade for seals and porpoises, and 110 SPL for both of them. And for fish, 125 decidecade and also 110 decibels. So decibels on the name, but frequencies are different. And for excess level, we have chosen 20 dB excess level. So to make assessment, we need to consider frequency, temporal distribution, spatial distribution, and we have fixed frequencies, we have fixed temporal distribution by median value, and the unknown we can choose is spatial threshold, which was 20% of the habitat. How does it work? We have marine area or Baltic Sea sub-basin. We can find the part of this sub-basin or this area in which lobe is exceeded. And depending on the number, if it is more than 20%, we do not have GS. If it is less than 20% of area, GS is in place. So some noise maps for different frequency ranges. It's the same map, but on the right, you see by the red, the parts of the Baltic Sea where SPL 110 dB is exceeded. And this is the same for masking. Excess level of 20 dB in orange is exceeded on the shown here on the right side. This is for 1 particular month, of course. And same for 500 hertz, we can find and define this area where areas when where this excess level is exceeding 20 dB. If we look now to the distribution over the year for some selected sub-basins of the Baltic Sea, we can see that there is a strong seasonality. We have more sound during the winter and the spring and less in the summertime. But threshold of 20 dB is never attained for disturbance level. So 20% is never attained for disturbance threshold of 110 dB. But if we consider masking, for masking, we exceed the level in all of these areas. And by analyzing this, we can make, here is a table presenting all subbasins of the Baltic Sea, blue and red corresponding to GES, and other colors are not GES. And as you can see, 125 kilohertz decade for fish is not in GES for most of the year, while for marine mammals, it remains in good environmental condition. And this is a final map for HOLAS assessment. In this HOLAS assessment, we can see that here in red is area where 20% of each subbasin is exceeded. Lobe is exceeded, meaning that excess level is more than 20 dB. For marine mammals, it remains green. And cumulative impact from HOLAS 3, we can see that continuous anthropogenic sound in the third place, just after hazardous substances and eutrophication. If you want to know more about BIOS project and the BLUES project, here are some publications on these two projects. And in conclusion, so current continuous noise impact assessment was made based on TG noise and HELCOM recommendations for lobe values and spatial threshold of 20% or less. The Baltic Sea marine mammals, seals and porpoises are more sensitive to high frequency sound, which is 500 hertz decade, which do not propagate as far as MSFD indicator frequency sound, 63 and 125. And so we do not reach spatial threshold for marine mammals, and they are remaining in good environmental status, according to our first assessment. Baltic herring spawning grounds are in shallow coastal waters when they are unaffected by low frequency sound, but cod spawn in deep water and can be affected by continuous noise. Consequences of disturbing fish outside spawning areas, feeding grounds, and migrating paths should be clarified, and actually there are some studies on this subject. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Are these assessments on the effect of underwater noise on fish are based only on modeling and just the values of auditory thresholds, or are they based on some, I don't know, in-lab observation? So have the effect, for example, on the herring or cod was observed in like environment, or through the, I don't know, some underwater cameras, or the distribution of the schools of fish? How is it assessed?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, because really in this assessment, lobe is a very sensitive part, because this value of in decibels, which we consider as harmful for marine species, it is actually taken from some publications. So every one of them is taken from some publication, and experiments in these publications are typically in laboratory experiments. So in some experiment, so they can detect that herring is sensitive to this particular sound pressure level. That's all information we have. But actually, we are participating in one study where we're trying to understand the behavior of Baltic herring in sea conditions. So we have made some experimentations with biologists from Tartu University, but we haven't yet published these results. But we need more research like this, because not easy to communicate with fish, and not easy to understand what is harmful, what is not. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions or comments?
Can I just quickly ask you, Alexander, what kind of modeling you used in your study?
Yes. So in both in the BIAS project and in Helcom Blues project, we have used QuanOps modeling environment from Quiet Oceans in France.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
So it is based on a collection of AES data, and so they collect the rest environmental data, etc., and so they can produce sound maps on yes for every month of the year.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So thank you. No more questions. Then we can invite Jeff Schnitzler from the Institute of Terrestrial and Aquatic Wildlife Research. Please bear in mind that we already surpassed our time, so we are time constrained. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I will start quickly. So hello, first, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to present here the outcome of our Horizon 2020 project called SATURN. It's a quite interesting project because it's bringing together me as a marine biologist, but also marine engineers and ship builders. And so we are looking for direct solutions for underwater noise. And so and within this project, we have a work package 3 where we are looking at particular impact of ship noise to the behavior, health, energy, and populations of aquatic organisms. And here we are clearly talking about these levels of onset for biological effects. And so if you talk about assessing the effects of underwater noise on aquatic animals, it's particularly complex because we have a large number of taxa which is involved, and each of them have their own spectral and temporal sensitivities to sound, and also their own behavioral and physiological sensitivity to these acoustic disturbances. And so we aimed in SATURN to work on different taxa, on invertebrates, fishes, and marine mammals, and that's quite difficult, I would say. And so for each taxon, we have chosen suitable methods to test this. And so for the invertebrates, we have made some, basing our work on experiments in an experimental setup that you can see here. It's called the Aquavip. It's in the University of La Catalunya in Barcelona at the place of Michel André. And so it's an acoustic chamber that consists of a pair of electrodynamic agitators that are enclosed in this transparent box. And so you can expose invertebrates to either the acoustic pressure or the particle motion feature of sound exposure. And so we can test the different if you're playing with the relative phase of the shaker, you can either use the acoustic pressure or the configuration of particle motion and see how the effects differentiate between those two components of noise, actually. And so, as you have seen, you have a transparent chamber. You can already see how they react. So you can see behavioral reactions, but they are also measuring different other parameters like oxygen depletion. They are using electronic microscopy of sensory epithelia and statocysts of these invertebrates. They assess the hatching rate, and they are also now doing some experiment with proteomic analysis to see how the health of the larvae or the invertebrates is affected. And so it's a unique laboratory configuration for exposing aquatic organisms to low frequency underwater radiated noise. The analysis multimodal, so we can assess different endpoints at the same time. And here, first preliminary results show already that the acoustic pressure might be more important than the particle motion. But For instance, with sepia and the hatching, they have seen that there's a combination of the two exposures. So yeah, the project will end next year, so stay tuned for final results. Then we are also working on fish, and there we are mainly working on migratory fish, and there our colleagues in Leiden University in the Netherlands have measured natural soundscapes in 3 rivers, the Gironde, the Elbe in Germany, and the Rhine in the Netherlands. And yeah, the idea was that yeah, fish have to migrate through these river systems at specific times of their life, and so they yeah, the natural soundscape might play a very important role in this migration. And so what they have done is they went on a canoe and let them drift and measured the underwater radiated noise in these yeah, river streams. And they could by this way then assess the rate of exposure to boat noise over the course of the day. And they could assess how the natural soundscapes are actually yeah, exposed. And so you can see here the soundscape when the boat is absent, and here when the boat is present. And if you look at the specific part like the 100 Hertz frequency band, where a lot of fish are actually communicating, you can make an analysis like this. And you see that a large part of the information actually where fishes are communicating might be lost yeah, masked actually in such a situation where a boat is present. Now to see which effects this might have, yeah, we are testing this in an experimental setup, a big swim tunnel called Microdome. So this is actually built up. So you have an exposure chamber where the fishes are swimming through, and then that should mimic the natural soundscape. And you can see how the fishes is then deciding if they are swimming upstream or downstream, depending on the acoustic exposure. And these experiments are still running. And so, yeah, we can see already that yeah, fishes needs to pass noisy estuaries when they want to migrate. Actually, you have a boat presence which is highly depending on the river. So you have 12% in the Gironde, and 100% of the time you have vessels passing in the Rhine, for instance. Yeah, but how much this natural soundscape is drowned by ship noise is the big question. The impact that it might have can then be assessed in such kind of experimental setup like the Microdome. Then let's move over to marine mammals. There we had a different strategy. There we are collecting directly the field data by attaching acoustic tags on the animals. And there we are working on pilot whales in Gran Canaria, on porpoise in the Danish Baltic Sea, and here on harbor seals in Germany. And the good thing is that you are simultaneously recording the noise that the animal received and the direct behavior it has towards this noise. And so, for instance, with the seals, we have 21 days of recording. And so we worked on a way how we can process the data more or less automatically. So we calculating decade bands averaged over 30 seconds in order to make yeah, continuous noise such as ship noise more visible than short transient noise. And we have chosen the 2 kilohertz band because it was the lowest frequency band, which was unaffected by the flow noise of the animal, so the animal movement. And there we were looking for high noise events, and then we were looking if it was really yeah, a vessel. So 3 independent raters were listening to these recordings and said, yeah, this is either rain or a vessel. And yeah, so we could clearly identify vessel passes. Then we compared, we checked if this recorded vessel were also could be associated with an AIS signal of vessels. And so in the recordings, we can see the race time of the sound that we recorded. If the ship is moving fast or slowly or coming close to the animal or further away, the noise will be recorded differently. And so you can see on the shape of the noise exposure if, which is in relation with the distance and the speed of the vessel in relevance to the animal. And you can get this data actually from AIS data, and then you can see if these informations fit together. And so you can see if the recorded vessel is likely an AIS vessel or not. And here it's quite surprising that we have, in many cases, no AIS vessel at all around. That's an indication that, a lot of recreational boats which don't have AIS might be the source of exposure actually. And other vessels there you can clearly see the source vessel, and then you have a bit more information, like here, which type of vessel was causing this exposure. This was also published in this open source publication. And then we are now looking at the biological effects, and there we were working, for instance, here with the harbor porpoise. We have the advantage that we can measure their feeding buses, and so which are also recorded on this tag. And we could see that during daytime, and we were comparing the energy intake actually of these animals, and how this affected, this ship noise exposures affected the foraging of the animals. And so here we could see that during daytime you don't have such a big effect, but during nighttime, which is a moment where most porpoise are actually foraging, you had a clear decrease in this feeding bus, in this prey catcher tanks during night. And with the respiration, we had nearly no response. But this gives us then the possibility to calculate an effect on an average porpoise of 60 kilograms. We know the feed metabolic rate. We know how many buses they make during a day. And we know that with 16 vessel events per day, 7 during daytime and 9 during nighttime, that we reduce around 60 feeding opportunities per day, which is equivalent to 2.9% of the daily energy rate. And with the respiration, we have also a slight loss, and this can be summed up to 3.1% energy per day. And now is the question, is that important? If we put this in equivalent, or we extrapolate this over a whole year, this 3.1% can be equivalent to 7 to 10 kilo of fat per year. And we all know that it's very important for the porpoise in winter to have this fat layer to compensate for the loss of the cost of thermoregulation. And we know also that pregnancy and lactation is also very energy demanding. And so we can imagine that vessel noise might have a strong impact on populations of porpoises. This is all summarized here. So if you are interested, we have a lot of deliverables and publications out of this project, which are already publicly available. And as I said, the project will end in the first half of this year. And so please stay tuned for further results. And I hope that within these different techniques, we can come up with clear levels of onset for biological effects in the future. Thank you for your attention. And sorry for the time, that was a bit longer than.
Okay, thank you for your in-depth presentation. So it seems that however, the good environmental status through modeling might be achieved for marine mammals. If you look at the matter from the physiological side, it seems that it has a significant effect of, at least on the harbor porpoise. I don't know how it is with the seals.
So there we are also looking at prey capture attempts, but there we don't have the feed metabolic rates. We don't know it for a seal, and we cannot hear the respirations. And so, yeah, the clear energy input output, we don't have it, but we see that that we have some energetic reactions. So less foraging and more stroke rates, which are also an indication of direct energy expenditure, and so that they might also be heavily impacted by vessel noise, actually. And then with the fishes and invertebrates, we are still at the beginning of a lot of things, and also the complete definition of levels of onset of biological effects will, I think, entertain us for the next coming years, I would say. And there will be a lot of debate, I would, think so.
So one more question from Andrea.
Yeah.
Just a question in general. I put in the chat, but just do not rush Torbjörn and the discussion. If we could stay 10 minutes approx longer, if everyone, that's okay, just to give time for discussions. Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay, so are there any more questions?
I would like to ask, Jeff, thank you for your presentation. Am I understood correctly that 58 out of 2,000 buzzes, meaning 58 attempts, not successful attempts for foraging? But
yes,
all these 2,000 are attempts for foraging, but how do you calculate this percentage? Can you?
So that's our colleagues from Aarhus University who have done this calculation. So they have measured that porpoise make 2,000 buzzes per day, and that nearly 90% of all these buzzes are successful prey catchers. And so they had some studies where they could see the echo of the prey fish, which then eaten, and then the echo is gone, and so they can see that it was a successful prey catch, and so they know how many energy needs to come in per day divided by the number of buses, and if we lose this, so I think they looked also as an average prey of a porpoise, how much energy there is in it, and so they could back calculate. But it's of course an extrapolation, and it's I think it's a good way to communicate what does it mean 3.3% of your energy, but because most people cannot relate to it. But if we should make reduce our energy intake by 3% per day, we might suffer. Not all of us, but depends. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So if there are no more questions, then I would like to invite Torbjörn Johansson to give his presentation on the underwater noise and from shipping and recreational boating. Torbjörn is from Swedish Environmental Research Institute. So please welcome.
Sure, thank you, Michel. Actually, I've changed the title of the presentation a bit.
Okay.
I hope that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Let's see. There we go. Do you see a presentation now? Fantastic. All right. So, hi, thanks for inviting me, and thanks also to Jarosław and Aleksander for giving such a thorough introduction to underwater acoustics and noise mapping. That means that this presentation will be a little shorter. So I'll describe a little about our efforts on underwater noise mapping for recreational boats that we're doing within the Interreg DMOSC project here today. And I'll hopefully finish with a nice hook into the Quiet Waters proposal as well. So that's what you can expect. Let's see if we can manage to move forward here. There we go. So DMOSC first is an Interreg North Sea project that is coordinated by Rijkswaterstaat in the Netherlands. It follows on from a previous project about underwater noise in the North Sea that was called Jomapans. And DMOSC will start in the beginning of this year, and it will run for 3 years. Has a budget of a bit over 3 million euros, and IVL's part in this project is basically the mapping and the impact of recreational boat underwater noise. So while DMAS is about noise mapping for all of the North Sea and for the main relevant sources, so shipping, offshore wind farms, seismic, possibly, and also recreational boats, IVL is mainly focusing on recreational boats. And that's what I'll tell you about today. So our approach for boat noise mapping is a little different from the approach that you can take for mapping ship noise, mainly because you don't know where the boats without AIS transmitters are. So we came up with the idea of using boat density, so like a statistical distribution of where boats are likely to be, instead of an estimate of where they actually are, and then using that statistical distribution to make a noise map. So that is the first kind of thing that needs to go into this noise mapping approach. And we've validated that by analysis and by simulations in MATLAB that will work if you have the correct statistical distribution for the boats. Of course, then you have to do that. And the way we're doing that is we're using satellite images to detect the boats. And the idea is that if we have enough satellite images over the boating season, of course, with good weather, and you can detect the boats in a good way, then you can determine a density map from those images and use that to calculate kind of a source distribution then for boat underwater noise. Then, of course, we need to know how much noise does a specific boat make. So a boat noise model is needed. And finally, we need to get a little further with sound propagation as well. Most underwater sound propagation models and studies are done in deep water. And we have decided to go for an area where there is some deep water, but it's also heavily populated by islands. It's an archipelago area with lots of shallow waters and lots of depth variations. So we will need to study that as well in order to get to an underwater noise map. And finally, of course, it's important that you validate your noise maps. So we made extensive measurements also in this area. I will now go into all these areas a little bit into detail, trying to describe what we've done. First, our study area is the Kosterhavet Marine National Park. It's on the Swedish west coast, close to the border with Norway. It's an area that's very rich in biodiversity, and it has about 750 islands. And so this summer we were there quite a lot, and we made some long-term noise measurements in 5 locations. When I say long-term, I mean 1.5 months. So we covered most of the boating season in this area. And we measured in 5 different locations with different characteristics. Number 5 you see on the top there is in the open sea. There's not a lot of shipping around here, but there are some ships and cruise ships going into the nearby town of Strömstad. And the other locations are either sheltered or in shallow areas, or close to lanes for recreational boating. I don't know how it is in your countries, but in this country we have like suggested lanes for boating that they can follow to travel along the coast, and many boaters do that. So we try to capture the noise from those lanes as well. And some preliminary results that I got from my colleague Carl this morning. Here you see a comparison of probability density spectrograms from a certain location from all the recordings for 1.5 months. And here we are comparing typical noise levels in afternoons, so from 12 to 18, and in evenings from 18 to 24. And the only thing I would like to point out here is really that the noise floor, so the bottom of these curves, is much lower in mid-frequencies in the evenings than in the afternoons. And we speculate that that is due to the boat traffic. It can also be due to weather. You know, the weather is typically calmer and quieter at night, and we'll have to do some form of effort to try and separate that. But that's a clear difference anyway. So we'll get more into that. But most of the analysis in this project will happen early next year. So that's just a preliminary result for now. What we have done, though, is we finished the results on boat densities and boat detection. Here you see a map of the Kosterhavet study area that we're using, and all the blue dots indicate a detected boat. So there are quite a lot of boat detections from the, I think about 7 images that we managed to collect total, which had reasonably cloud-free data. And then the kind of color distribution in the background shows you the estimated density. Of course, there's a lot of things you can play around with this kind of kernel density estimation that we've done here. But I think this kind of density estimation looks rather reasonable. And you may ask why aren't there so many boats to the south of the main coastal island? It's because that's an area where the speed is restricted to 5 knots. It's a very scenic area, so you can go there. But if you want to move somewhere else, most boaters would avoid that or go around it in order to move a little faster. Let's see. And also, well, boat underwater noise typically depends on speed. It will be a topic of quiet waters to investigate exactly how that happens and how strong that dependence is. But there have been a lot of reports that there is a dependence. So another thing that we will need to do to get the boat noise map to be accurate, we think, is to have an idea of, in a certain location, what speeds are the boats likely to keep. And we've said basically that, well, in the speed restricted area, we'll assume that they're actually keeping the speed restriction. And then we've assumed that close to some form of land, they're probably keeping a lower speed. And then the plot on the right shows you some form of predicted typical speed. Of course, there will be a distribution of speeds within each grid cell as well, because all boats aren't capable of keeping like 15 knots or 20 knots. But that is a sort of predicted typical speed that we will use. Moving on to boat underwater noise modeling. We recently published a paper about boat underwater noise signatures, which looked mostly at speed dependence, sources, and the directivity of the noise of small vessels. And some key results there were, on the left here, you see the total source level, broadband source level versus speed for 4 different vessels. Well, actually 7 different vessels, but we only have 4 of them at a number of speeds. And the main result here is really that the source level seems to increase until the boats start to plane, until they reach their planing speed. And then once they are planing, it doesn't seem that the source level increases very much more. It's a rather plausible result, really, when you think about that. When you come to planing, the boat travels very efficiently, and you don't need very much more power to increase the speed quite a lot. Still, I think it's the first time that I've seen it, and I've seen other results that indicate that this is not the case also. So there is definitely a need for more research here to understand when does this happen and when does it not. Another thing that we did was to try and identify the different sources of noise, components in the noise. So we identified tonals in the noise of one boat, a boat which also measured engine speed on board, so that we could associate tonals in the recorded noise with sources on the boat. We could say if they were from the engine or they were from the propeller. If they were an unidentified tonal, we couldn't say, or if it was broadband non-tonal. And the results here are also rather plausible. At low speeds, where the propeller isn't cavitating, the dominating noise source is the engine. But when you get to higher speeds, in this case above 7 meters per second, the propeller is typically the dominant noise source. Non-total noise, which can be broadband, cavitation noise is also strong. And the engine is some 10 to 15 dB lower for this particular boat. Of course, that is the result for a single boat, and you can't really generalize that to say that that will apply for all boats. But it's the type of analysis that can be useful to understand the contributions to the noise of a certain boat. Right, so when we don't know enough about boat underwater noise, we can maybe look to ship underwater noise, where there's been a lot more results. This video is from a research project that we led in 2022, where we measured the underwater noise from vessels that were electrical hybrid vessels. So you could either power them using a battery, or you could turn on a diesel engine, a diesel generator on board as well. And we wanted to see what is the effect of that diesel generator, how much of that noise comes into the water. And looking at that, this is a comparison. So the graph really shows you the difference between source levels when you have the diesel generator on versus when you have only the batteries. for 3 different ships. So we didn't only measure this ship. And the key takeaway is basically that there is typically not that much difference. You see on one of the boats, it's about 10 dB difference between 100 and 200 hertz there. That's this one, in fact. And we could clearly associate tones in that area coming from the diesel generator as the source of the difference. Otherwise, it doesn't seem that there's much difference really between having a diesel generator on and off. But we should say that this kind of boat is already a kind of modern construction for a ship. It would also be relevant to compare to conventional propulsion, where you have an engine and a shaft and a propeller. We also did that. So the green curve in this plot is a diesel electric vessel versus a conventional sister vessel, where everything is the same except the kind of engine arrangement. And we can see that the diesel electric vessel is quieter in low frequencies below about 500 hertz by about 5 to 10 decibel. We also compared an old versus a new ship powered by liquid natural gas. And we could see that there were large differences between these ships. Well, actually, we measured 2 ships of each class. So that says that, well, there are things happening also in ship underwater noise, and modern ships can be quieter. I don't know if such results in boating, but it's definitely relevant to try and find such results for boats as well. The final thing we're doing then is looking at sound propagation, as I mentioned. We made lots of measurements this summer with a loudspeaker and moving 5 different underwater recorders around in this area to try and understand what happens in shallow waters. So on the left there, you have an area where the deep area of that area is about 10 meters. And then you have shallower areas that go down to 2-3 meters. And we wanted to see what happens with propagation just along the 10-meter area when you go across a shallow area of maybe 2 meters, or when that shallow area is actually a bank that's much larger. We also looked at propagation then to compare in like an area that's 30 meters deep. What happens then when you go into shallow areas? And finally, really exciting, we looked at what happens when you try and transmit sound from one side of a narrow island, like on the right there. Does the sound actually diffract around that island? Does it go through it? We've seen indications that it may actually pass through, so we wanted to see what happens there. And that will also be really interesting to see next year what comes out of that. Finally, some selected research needs I've listed. Well, we need to refine and validate underwater noise mapping for recreational boats. What we're doing in Damask, I think is a useful strategy, but it's the first attempt that we've seen for this. And we need to investigate that more and investigate alternative methods for mapping the boats where they are. I know that FRUG have proposed a method for using drones to map the boats. That would be really interesting to see how that works and to compare with this. We need more determinations of in situ noise levels from boats. We need more knowledge on boat underwater noise signatures, including their speed defendants. And it's important that that kind of investigation is done with a common framework or a standard for how to do these measurements so that they're really comparable and that the quality is high. Boat underwater noise mitigation, of course, is something that we need to investigate. And the impact assessment, I haven't spoken about the impact here, but that's, of course, extremely important to look at the impact on the animals and the biodiversity. And finally, of course, raising boat owner awareness and advocacy on the whole issue of underwater noise, as you've done such a good job at in Red Noise Baltship. And finally, Andrea, there you go. It all feeds into the Light Quiet Waters proposal. All right, thanks. That's what I wanted to say today. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions regarding that quite difficult topic? Yeah, Jeff, please.
Yeah, thank you, Torbjörn, for the nice presentation. So I was really surprised by the high variety of signatures of these recreational boats. So the next step, if you know how many boats are actually present, which kind, so it's difficult to predict then the noise that they will emit actually, because you had boats which are more or less silent, others which are very terrible, and yeah, they're all recreational boats. I would say then. Yeah.
Yeah, I should say probably that the most silent one in my graph was a jet ski. Actually, I forgot to mention that, and they are a bit more quiet in the water. But yes, there is a large variation, and I expect that this noise map that we will produce will possibly be right on average, but there will probably be some. Well, there will probably be some errors, I imagine. It will be important to see where those uncertainties come from.
No, cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
Next question, please, Aleksander.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting presentation. Tell me, please, how much satellite pictures do you have during the day? And the second question, how good the satellite maps or pictures are to define what type of recreational ship you have? Is it sailing ship? Is it motor ship?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We have about 10 satellite images, but they are Landsat with a resolution of 10 meters. So we really can't say at all what kind of boat it is. We have no idea. So the only kind of boat noise model we'll be able to have will be something that's very general, that assumes that we don't have any idea what kind of boat it is. And that's definitely a deficiency here. What we'd like to do in quiet waters is to pay for high resolution images from a satellite. I forget the name, but there are satellite images that you can buy that have a resolution of 0.5 meter. And then I think, as you suggest, it would be really important to look at what kind of boat it is, how large it is. Maybe you can look at the wake behind the boat and say something about the speed.
So what are the types of the engines that you think, like through advocacy, well, should be introduced, like, I don't know, European-wide? You said something about the electric engine with the diesel part. This you think is the future of the I don't know, shipping or recreational boating?
I don't know really about recreational boating. I mean, it will be important to investigate these electrical engines. What I didn't say is that we only measure their cruise speeds, and at low speeds, I imagine when the propeller isn't cavitating, it could be really, really quiet with an electrical engine. But we have also, of course, several other innovations that we want to look at in the Quiet Waters project that could help.
Okay, so are there any more questions? If not, I think it's, Professor Tęgowski, one more question.
One common question. Years ago, I spent 5 months on the fisheries ship between Falkland Islands and Horn, and I tried to attract squids with continuous wave signal 500 Hertz. And I made my experiment during the day. Normally, squids are attracted by lights in the night. And I received very positive results. After 15-20 minutes, squids were attracted by noise, continuous noise, 500 Hertz. Could you answer me for the question? We discussed about harmful influence of noise on the marine animals, but I observed the opposite phenomena. Squids were attracted, and our ship were the best between the about 30 ships, fishery ships in this area, because we used also sounds to attract squids. It's completely opposite phenomenon, as we discussed. Yeah, thank you.
I don't think I'm the best person to answer that. Jeff, maybe, or someone who knows more about biology.
Yeah, so the wonderful thing is that the squids don't have ears. So how they actually perceive the sound, how do they react? So it's still completely more or less unknown actually, and so we need way more research in the future. But I didn't knew that they were attracted by sound. So that's
would it be through some particle movement, for example, or?
Yeah, so our colleagues, they have now described the statuses, so the sensory cells of sepia, and yeah, so they should be sensitive to some yeah, particle motion, and maybe they react to that. Yeah. But what's the driving force attracting them? I don't know actually. So. Yeah.
Sorry for my question, but you are specialists in biology and underwater acoustics. I am only acoustic.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we need more people who are actually interacting and trying to understand better what's happening. Same here with, if I might say, is the presentation of Aleksander. So how do you define the habitat is also very central, and you're looking at good environmental status. So here, for some practical reason, they have chosen the whole basin as habitat, but we can also look a bit on a finer scale. So not every habitat is, or not the whole basin is yeah, suitable habitat for the animals. And we should really protect areas or check areas where the animals are actually occurring. So that's also part that we are doing in DMASC, trying to better define yeah, sensible species and also where they are. And but as I said, it's a lot of work to do out there.
Okay. No more questions. Then I think we can start with our discussion. Yeah. So I'll ask perhaps Andrea to take the floor now.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to first thank everyone for all the really interesting presentations. I think if I can just give some takeouts, would be that like it's really needed as well that each project talk to each other, because it seems that like we can find very interesting questions as well, and findings that can be used in the future, hopefully through quiet waters. But I also wanted to mention a few things that I listened today. So one of them was that awareness is really needed, and given that recreational boats are also increasing. Another is that we need to keep contact with stakeholders, like now that we have made contacts and we have identified people working with the topics and interested in the topic. We need to keep the contact for this. And well, that the topic, even though the topic is now higher on the political agenda, there's more will needed and more investment. For example, what you were saying, Aleksander, that monitoring is key, and well, we need AIS transmitters for recreational boats. So those are kind of my takeaways from the presentations. And well, I also wanted to wish you all very happy holidays and the end of the year. It's like already, yeah, I think a lot of people are getting into the Christmas mood. So it's at least nice we got to see each other before the end. And it's, as I said, really, really interesting things happening, and hopefully it will continue this way. So thank you so much on my side. Now Misha got very Christmassy. I don't know if you, Mikolai, wants to say something.
Merry Christmas to you all, and well, yes, I guess we are done, yeah, for today. No more questions or comments. So
yeah,
thank you for your participation, your time, and attention, and see you, I guess. Yeah.